Afternoon, everyone. Looks like we're on what is it? Around the Bend, episode 16. And today I have Richard Rogers, actually from Robert Half. He is on one of our data engineering, data science teams, working on our AI tool Art. How are you doing today, Richard?
Good, good, Blake. How are you?
Pretty good. Just trying to enjoy this Friday and wrap up for the day and have a good weekend.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time out. I know that your team has been working for quite some time on this art tool, and with all the different AI tools that are kind of popping up, and you see Bard and GPT and all these different things. Like, you've been working on this a lot longer than those have been publicly available. So I don't know if, it'd be kind of good to give people maybe a historical context on what maybe AI was just a couple years ago.
Yeah, so Art's an internal tool that we use to match candidates to jobs. Um, we're attempting to match qualified, available, interested candidates. Art's about 4.5 years old. Um, yep, so the AI technology has been improving over time, of course. One advantage that we have is our historical data that Robert Half has that we use to create our models. Um, yep. So,
I think the one thing that's kind of interesting, because a lot of these tools right now, which even the ones I play with, are large language models. So it's almost like they're doing a
mhm.
computation of the English language or whichever language it's in, because usually things follow general flow. They have a general set of how things go. I work on the front lines at Robert Half doing the sales and recruiting aspect of the business, which really is what the business is. And I think from a data engineering standpoint, what Art is trying to do and similar competitors in the market is really difficult, because you have to basically smash all these factors of, hey, what makes a good candidate for a job or a role, and then basically get that to an end result. Which, I work in the technology division, so IT, engineering, analytics, cybersecurity, and that can be really, really, really complicated to like read through, say, hey, these skill sets, this amount of experience, all these factors maybe equal a good or bad candidate. um, and we also have legal, marketing, like HR staff as well, which maybe those kind of systems are able to maybe process a little bit easier, but I don't want to assume, right? Because I'm sure there's some lawyers and marketers out there that'll get real mad if I say one's easier than the other.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think a lot of the complication comes in, using the AI to read a resume and then extract the parts of the resume that are actually skills and to be able to build a nice ontology of those skills. And then to be able to define um, what a good candidate would look like for that particular role. And we're lucky enough at Robert Half to have historical placement data that we can use to help us define what a good candidate looks like for that role and try to match those resumes as close as we can to those placed candidates that we have placed historically.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
But like, for example, like how does Art and I guess the AI tools, how do they quantify like some of those like soft skills? Like, is it running like essentially like algorithms? Like, let's say it's a um like a front desk assistant, something like that. Does it conceptually understand, or is it more like a calculation of this 2 years, this role equals this positive correlation kind of thing?
Yeah. So we have our roles clustered. And again, based on our historical placement data, we're able to build clusters of skills around job titles. So, for instance, we know what a Java developer is supposed to look like. We know what kind of skills a Java developer has that we've placed in the past. That's called a Java developer cluster.
Hmm.
And so when the matching process sees a resume, it extracts it extracts skills from the resume. It extracts work history, and extracts timelines, and then it tries to take those skills and find the best cluster match that resume represents, and then assigns that resume to that cluster match. There's an idea of a central skill set,
Hmm.
um, and the closer you are to that central skill set, the better you are as a match for that cluster, for that whatever that job title is, that cluster that
Hmm.
candidate gets assigned to.
And I have seen it like in the works. I was working on a front end engineer role one time, and I think it was like, okay, maybe I'm gonna totally like mess it up, but I was like, I remember there being heavy Python. Um, there was like a heavy data piece to the role, and is Node a front end, right? I either mix it up.
Node.js. Yeah.
Yeah, Node.js is an important front end language, right? See, I'm gonna show my own.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not ashamed to admit that I don't know, but I remember that based on those skill sets, it was a role here in the Bay, but it could have been remote, and it had like it ranked. It was like, hey, here's your top local, here's your top national candidates, and it was really cool because
Mm-hmm.
it probably took, if you think about how much time, I don't know if you ever gone through that process yourself, but even if you jumped on LinkedIn Recruiter, or a similar kind of recruiting site, even our own internal tools where we have applicants, and you try and scan through each person, like you have to read, okay, is this good? Go to the next one, read, okay, is this good? And it
Yeah.
just it speeds up that delivery time, which for really us, it's like an optimization on delivery. Um, but it is sort of interesting from a data engineering standpoint because that's just such a difficult problem to really quantify because it's supposed to be based around data, and you have non,
Mm-hmm.
would it be considered like non-numerical data? Because like I feel like those are like qualitative points that you have to turn into quantitative points.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of the AI is reading that text that a human has written and interpreting it, and then converting it to skill sets and experience, and then trying to match that converted those converted skills to a cluster, and assigning that candidate to the cluster, and then assigning him that person a score depending on how close that person is to the central idea of that cluster.
Mm-hmm. And I can't remember if I was mentioning this one to you. Did I tell you like the Bill Belichick example they used for this
Mm-mm.
one? It was
No.
AI making data, or IBM making data simple podcast. They had one guy who had a sports betting algorithm, like some AI company, and he was talking about how like Bill Belichick, the really famous coach, um,
Mm.
he had such a skill level in, he was a football coach, and he
Mm-hmm.
could look at a player, look at a game, basically extrapolate all these data points, process it, and he'd like spit out numbers. He'd be like, "Oh, there's a 70% chance this person's going to do this. This guy's going to kill this game. This person's going to, fail in this game." So it's like there's all these data points, and it's really hard to quantify them. And sometimes we look at like even a recruiter, for example, like they could look at a candidate, look at a
Mm-hmm.
resume, talk to them for a minute, and it's like those are all data points, and they take all these qualitative data points, and the humans able to like suck it in and basically like almost run an internal percentage prediction, like 90% chance this is good, 10% chance it's bad, or vice versa. And I think that's an
Yeah.
interesting way for normal people like myself to conceptualize how does that data engineering and those AI systems work, is like what we say as a gut feeling is actually our brain assigning probabilities and other things to non-quantitative factors.
Right. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of that comes into play about knowing your market, knowing your client, what your client expects and likes. I think that could be a next step for us too, is trying to focus it more on tailor it more towards clients or contacts that we have, um, instead of just clustering it based on roles, based on the totality of past placements that we have.
Hmm. Well, I know too, this is a tool that gets used occasionally. There is a tool with Robert Half called Robert Half Direct where clients can just go in. Basically, some people just have had bad historical experiences with recruiters. Maybe they get that
Mm-hmm.
feeling like going to a used car dealership or something, maybe a bad past experience, or they just want to automate their hiring. You can go in,
Mm-hmm.
select the role, it'll generate a ream of candidates, and then they can select it. The funny part is,
Mm-hmm.
um, there was some data point they had around it of the 700, or there was a couple thousand orders that had occurred over time. Only like 10
Mm-hmm.
of them never required a person to get involved. So at the point,
Yeah.
it's like in the future, I think that's a really interesting, maybe application of what you're talking about, where it's like if the AI can get trained so well on like, hey, what does this client really love? What do they like? You can actually automate that process from end to end. But there's like that gap in that qualitative, um, maybe like I don't know if it'd be an emotional piece. Like, well, how would you phrase that? You know what I mean? That like linkage.
So I think there's something around intent too that we think about a lot and keep working on. So I think that when a human being reads a resume or reads a job description and works with a client, they can infer intent of that client around how strongly they need certain skills or they don't need certain skills. And I think that's one thing that that we can continue to improve in AI. We do have some ways that we try to ask for additional input when we do matches. We try to ask the user for additional input to give us some guidance about intent for skills, and then we mix that in with the match that comes. But I think that's another thing that maybe you're thinking about is when a human being reads a job description or resume and they've worked with a client for so long, they might just know what that client needs. And it might be intuitive by reading the resume, whereas that might be harder to do for AI is to understand intent. Um, and so, yeah.
No, it is true. And especially too, there's the reading between the lines. So in a practical sense, like clients will tell you things that they think are super important or that they've on the surface they are super important, but there's other factors at play that you have to worry about. Like, oh, they said this skill, one skill set is important, but really it falls outside of the scope of the role. You present them a candidate that's very strong in the core skill sets, and they'll like that candidate more than the one that perfectly fit their job description. So there's that reading between the lines factor that is difficult when dealing with humans.
Yeah. So we've all seen those job descriptions where they list 50 skills that you need.
Hmm.
But really, if you give them somebody who's really strong in the top three or four, they're good to go. It's that kind of thing that, we can continue to work on, I think.
Or how will, just in a general sense, like how would any of these systems quantify personality? Because that is a huge factor. Like somebody can have all the skills, but if they don't work well, they don't communicate well, they're not a good fit for almost any company nowadays. How do these systems quantify that?
Yeah, I think that's still an outstanding area um, of improvement. We're still working on that. We don't currently stress those kinds of things in our models.
Hmm.
I've looked at some third party tools that tried to do it. Um, I think it's just not there yet. I think that the beauty of what Robert Half does is that we use cutting edge technology to help a human being place a candidate,
Hmm.
and that human being can curate that list that we give them by knowing their client and knowing the client they're working with, and then understanding who the candidates are and what might be a good fit on the soft skills.
Hmm.
Um, like I said, right now that's not really a part of the criteria that we use to provide matches. It's really hard to understand that just by looking at a resume. We'd have to build other mechanisms to get that kind of information. Like, I remember talking to a third party that used personality tests,
Hmm.
but there's a lot of stuff that comes with like how many candidates are going to spend the time. It's a lot of friction to get a candidate to take a personality test, right? And then really, how accurate are they?
Yeah.
Can we
It's
really define human beings well enough doing a personality test?
well, also
Um,
sociopaths will pass. Sociopaths pass personality tests with colors and empathy tests. So there's that factor too. I don't put a lot of weight in them.
yeah.
Back in the day, I used to be in the police academy, and they had us take this test, and it was like just bizarre questions. How much do you like the idea of being a politician? I'm like, well, if I clearly wanted to, like, do you enjoy hurting people? I'm like, well, obviously, you could get around a lot of these personality tests that are the proven data questions or the Myers
Yeah.
Briggs. I've taken that one too. I'm like, I went back, I took it 3 times, and I purposely skewed it to different personality types. So I don't, I mean,
Hmm.
there's validity if someone took it with an honest intent and invested the time and the energy, but I don't think that's a realistic
Yeah.
approach. And then, just from a practical standpoint, like you have all the different states have different laws, you have workers' rights, protecting workers. So that's a really hard thing to quantify. But I guess if I was going to say zoom out, like let's say it's not Robert Half or even recruiting, like how would an AI system or an algorithm, like what kind of inputs would it need? Would it need to like talk to someone, chat with them? I don't know if you've heard of this.
Yeah. Maybe, huh?
There's this new thing, personal AI. um, I set up a profile and it's supposed to replicate your online persona so that if you, I know it's kind of creepy,
Okay.
but if you pass away
Yeah.
or if you want it to start responding to things for you, it's supposed to be able to do that. Now it's in a developmental phase where it's kind of like in a sandbox, and it's freaky because it's like
Hmm.
you're talking to yourself. So if anyone's listening,
Yeah.
go there. It's a free thing, but it's freaky because you'll like talk to yourself, and each time you type an answer and you give it feedback, like, hey, I don't talk like that, I like to say things like this, or it'll ask you questions and you respond back, it starts to adapt your method of communication.
Wow. Is it speech also? Is it mimicking your speech, or is it just text on a screen?
I'm pretty sure it's text, but now you're asking this
Yeah.
good question and it's making me think. So I'm just opening up a different tab real quick.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, it's just going to be where, you know, Blake, you tell something, hey, I need to do podcast number 42, and I want it to be about, XYZ, and it can just do it all for you and have your face there too. You don't need to even participate.
So actually, the cover art that I have on all three now are it's AI generated. So that picture that you'll see when it's on YouTube and Spotify, it's like
Mm,
it's like
yeah.
a it looks like a watercolor painting of a forest with like a road going it. And I said, create me a picture of a road bending through the forest or bending through nature. And it created this picture. And then I just added the subtitle around the bend. And I was like, this is just trippy. Like it freaks you out. Or one guy I know at Santa Clara County, he was like, oh, download this picture app, go in here. It'll like redo your face and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
these really stylistic. I mean, have you seen those AI generated like commercials?
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
it was like there was
It's
that one.
getting good. It's getting good.
Did you see the one that was supposed to be like Pepsi,
Yep.
where the AI like clearly has hallucinations because it created the
Yeah.
people and the
Yeah.
people
Yeah. That one.
was were like
Yeah.
stretching in different ways, and then at the end
Yeah.
it was like repeating one part of what's that band Smash Mouth. It was like repeating one part of
Huh.
Smash Mouth's song, and then like or the whatever the replication of a Pepsi can like opens up and starts shooting fire everywhere, and it looks like it's in Russian.
Mhm.
So it can create things, but it creates things that are very very weird.
Yeah, it's just at the beginning. It'll get a lot better.
Well, that's why what you're saying is like, that future might not be that much in the future. Like that's that tool after sucking up like 4 months of data, or a year. Where's it going to be 1 year from now? Is like it's probably going to be way, 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 way better.
Yeah, and it's like the democratization of these tools. One interesting thing, I hang out in some forums where candidates hang out and talk about their recruiting experiences. And a
Uh-huh.
lot of them are starting to use things like large language models to write their resumes. And a lot of them are very aware that their resumes are being scanned by AI. And so it's beginning to be this battle of AI, where the resume that's provided is written by AI for AI to scan. I mean, at some point there won't be any human beings in anywhere, and it'll just be AIs doing everything.
Well, AI VAI. Well, that's the funny part. So it's like the big scary thing in cybersecurity was there was, AI cyber attacks, but then there's AI cyber defense now. So it's like it's just tit for tat, and it's like for every, you know, what is it? For every one checker, there's another tool that's supposed to circumvent the checker, or one for security, one circumvents security, and it just kind of, because the power of AI is it just is constantly doing without any inputs. It just is trippy.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean that's maybe the only thing that does weird me out a little too. Or like, what if somebody, with AI and all this stuff, you could replicate. Like, think about if a candidate was like, "Oh, I want to say that I am a 10-year, you know, 10 years of experience data engineer, and maybe
mm-hmm.
rewrite my LinkedIn to have 10 years of data experience." It's hard, it looks really good. It's hard to tell. Uh,
Yeah,
and then I don't know if somebody could get around like a technical round, but who knows if you could get like an AI program integrated into your computer or something, where you could be like, oh, solve this solve this problem, which I mean already exists. That's already a thing. Um,
yeah. If you could just sit there and type it in a Chat GPT and get the answer while you're interviewing,
well, that's
as
actually
long as you're not sitting in a room somewhere.
well, that's what I've heard happened in some instances with like startups. Like, I see these posts on LinkedIn about it, and there was a funny video. It was like, oh, this guy, he's like some engineer at Google or something, and he's like, I'm only getting paid 300 grand a year. He's like, I work so hard, and it shows him just like typing a line into Chat GPT. He's like, people don't understand what I go through. Yeah.
It's definitely going to change things. Yeah, for sure.
It will, but I feel like to a degree, the fear that all humans will go away is, it's meant for people unless we get Skynet. Until then, we're still going to need us around to do things. So I hope
Yeah, for sure.
the tools are, what are your what are your most optimistic and least optimistic potentials of AI? I feel like that's one everyone really likes to go off on.
Um, most optimistic I think would be, so I think that anytime new technology comes around, and it's coming so fast in our lifetimes, we've seen it over and over and over. There's a lot of um, concern and angst about new technologies and how it's going to take all our jobs. And in the end, I think it just mostly ends up changing some things. Some people get left behind, unfortunately, but um, and I feel like it never ever lives up to all of the fears that people imagine it's going to live up to, right? Um, it's always somewhere in the middle. Um, so I guess that would be that's probably my most optimistic view of it, is that it won't be nearly as bad as people think it will be, and it might disrupt some things, but yeah, I think humans will still need to be there um, to work with. It'll just be another tool. I think pessimistically, it puts us all out of work, and in the end, it's like Skynet that controls us and figures out that he doesn't need stupid humans anymore, and just
Mhm.
eliminates all of us, and it's good to go.
Yeah, I think you're
Yeah,
most
I think
optimistic.
it's easy to get excited about it, easy to get concerned and worried. I don't think it ever turns out that way, you know.
Well, it's funny because my dad, he used to be a car salesman, like for his whole career. He sold BMWs, and he actually sold a couple
Mm-hmm.
BMWs to our CEO back in the day. And
Oh yeah.
the funny thing is, when the internet came out, he was telling me, he's like, yeah, me and he had this coworker. They're like, oh, we're not gonna have a job. It's just gonna eliminate, our positions. We're not gonna even and have a purpose. And he was one of the best BMW salesmen in the country. And then didn't do anything. In fact, his business increased quite exponentially at that point because they brought in so many more customers. They were in San Mateo, Oracle was there. It was the beginning of the internet. Um, so for some people, it might be bad. You think of when the internet came, all those traditional, maybe like wholesalers or uh, middlemen type jobs kind of started to get pushed away with Amazon and things. But I'd say overall, we're probably like happier that we have a lot of these tools in our lives, and it created some efficiency, but I can't remember where I heard it, but it's like, the most crazy technological shifts like usually create like a 20 to 40% efficiency for humans. And
Mm-hmm.
like you said, we get really angry every time. I have a degree in history, and if you go back, people felt the same way about mechanized agriculture, about the Industrial Revolution, actually about trains. And before trains,
Mm-hmm.
people got really upset about water locks. So canals were
Mm-hmm.
going to destroy uh, their ways of living.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm sure when the internet came around, there was a lot of that angst too about how it was going to destroy things.
Well, I
Maybe
was
some of it's come true.
Well, yeah, it's definitely eliminated the middleman. So I think, a lot of the middleman people, and I'm just trying to think of other stuff. Like, has it caused some of engineering and things to be outsourced? Kind of, but, I think the worst fears never quite came. Maybe Y2K, or people thought the, that wasn't, maybe it was
Yeah.
sort of connected to the internet, but they thought all the nukes will go off and we're just game over because of the internet and just doom,
Nothing happened.
gloom and
Yeah.
doom.
Anticlimactic.
Yeah,
Yep.
or maybe we won't get Skynet. We'll get like Skyfriend or something
Yeah.
like there'll be something like it, but it will actually somehow be beneficial for us. I don't know.
Yeah. I think in our business too, I feel like there's been a lot of effort to kind of automate hiring and have it less human interaction, but somehow it feels like a lot of that process resists that. um, I think whenever you think about having to hire somebody and work with somebody, it's a huge investment for clients, and it's a leap of faith. And I think that in the end, it'll be probably one of the last things I think that will be replaced. I don't see, you know, especially for higher paying jobs or permanent jobs. Um, it feels like there's, to me, a lot of resistance there. So where we are at Robert Half is kind of a good spot to be in, where we, help our users place candidates at clients using human interaction, to do that. Yeah, I think a lot of people have tried to disrupt that, and I haven't really seen anybody be very successful so far doing it.
Yeah, it's kind of like there was quite a few people that left from Robert Half and other companies to Job, whatever they call it, Jobot. I don't, I say it wrong every time, but they were like, "Oh, we're gonna take away staffing. We're gonna, knock it down, increase all this efficiency. And there was that one company that had the pug as like their mascot, and I applied on there. Worst experience ever. No one got back to me. There was no yes, no no. They said, "Oh, we're gonna match you with all these jobs." Nothing happened. It was like,
Yep.
I think in the professional sphere, especially in like sales, things like that, there's just too many little factors that have to be
Mm-hmm.
thought about. It's very personal. I mean, I've even had times where, think about if like a direct hiring manager was in charge of looking over a bunch of resumes while doing their job, like let's imagine on your team. And there's probably, I've had times where I talk with an engineering manager, an IT manager, and they're like, "Oh, I don't like this profile." I'm like, "But you didn't really read it because they do X, Y, and Z." And they're like, "Oh, really?" And it's like, "Yeah, that's why you should actually look at this profile." So sometimes people shoot themselves in the foot without understanding they do. Um, and I just feel like it'd be really hard for technology to replace those soft aspects. Or sometimes you give an extra chance to somebody because you're like, "Hey, they've worked with us a lot, they come with great references," or
Mm-hmm.
you just have that feeling. You're like, "This person's solid." Like,
Mm-hmm.
we had a Snowflake database developer like that, couple, like probably like 4 months ago. Like, he was younger in his career, but everyone was like, "Wow, he
Mm-hmm.
can explain his deliverables really well. He knows, like, the whole project scope and how to like explain that." And that's like a skill in itself, but that's not something that would
Mm-hmm.
go on a resume. It's not like a skill you write down. um,
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to convey those kind of things. I think the other part of it too is that we sometimes forget is on the candidate side. I see a lot of uh, disappointment, I guess, in trying to create that efficiency for clients to be able to, automatically serve up the best resumes or the resumes that we think match that job. Um, and it's so easy to apply for jobs now. Someone can apply for 100 jobs a day. Um, and I do see some disappointment in candidates in getting caught in this automation, this kind of conveyor belt of resumes feeding into job, requirements, job orders, job needs, and kind of becoming disillusioned with it and disappointed in the whole process because it almost feels like they're a small cog in the machine. They're like the humanness has taken out of it. I think that that's an important thing to start to think about when we build our systems. I think we've rushed into kind of automating and making it way more efficient sometimes without, I mean, at Robert Half, we don't do it, but I think other companies maybe have done that where they haven't really considered the needs of human beings and how to integrate that technology where people will feel okay about participating in the process.
mhm. I mean, I absolutely agree. I think one of the nice things they've run into is that they appreciate that old school people relationship style of business, at least on my side of things. So they kind
Mm-hmm.
of push really hard for in person, making sure you're always calling people, checking up on your clients and your candidates. But I've been at the opposite end when I was applying for roles. Like, even just what, I've been at the company a year, so a year and 2 months ago when I was applying to all these places, you're just a cog. You're one person in a line of 100. I mean, the market was way better, but even then, there's a lot of roles I applied for that just no response, no nothing. A lot of the people in my
Mm-hmm.
network right now that are in, especially in engineering, IT, they're applying to roles, and it's like one out of 324, you don't feel like they care at all. You don't even get an email in most situations.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
Yeah.
also companies like Workday and, Genentech and all the big companies, they're all running filters. Like, those systems have filters that are like, if it doesn't trigger, the manager and the recruiters are not going to look through 325 applications. They're just not.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So they have like, I don't know if you'd call it AI, but they have, it's like screening. And if you don't get the right keywords,
Mm-hmm.
you're not put into that next phase of human review, which maybe they
Right.
forgot to put the right keyword, which is totally ridiculous that somebody that put a keyword who maybe is less qualified is getting at least into an interview or getting reviewed, where maybe somebody has a more old school resume, right? And they're a better candidate, but
Yeah.
it's just not, doesn't click in the algorithm.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, you could hope that the stuff gets better, or maybe my cool, my hopeful side of AI is like you can train AI models to also reinforce positive behavior. And like, I think the bad part of it is that it just replicates humans. So I've heard from a lot of smart people in the data engineering space, it will just copy what we do. So if we're mean and
Mm-hmm.
nasty, or if we're aloof and don't care, it's just gonna be aloof and not care. If we treat people well and we make that a data point and a, let's say a step in the process, maybe, the AI has no emotion about it. It doesn't care, but it will replicate
Mm-hmm.
positivity, if that makes sense. But that's more
Yeah.
of
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.
my super hopeful, super like let's all be nice to each other side of things.
Yeah. It would be great to be able to, I think, use that kind of idea on the candidate side when they're applying for jobs. And I mean, we don't need to know it's AI, but at least if we can get a nice email that seems personalized and, thanks for applying. Sorry you didn't get it. Here's some other jobs you might be interested in. It just, as long as I think it feels good,
Mm-hmm.
if it feels like it's from a human, I don't think that any of us probably need to know it is or isn't. I think there's a lot of good work that could be done on that side of it. I think.
That's actually one of the that same IBM podcast I was talking about. They did a bunch of surveys for some of their AI tools, and people said if they don't notice the tool is there or it's a system, they don't care. So if it's seamless and people feel good, they're okay with that version of technology. So people complain
Yeah.
about technology, but it's like if you really step back and look at your life compared to my memory probably of realistically begins like 2000, 2001, when I could really remember how things were. And there was all,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of things that have changed in our daily lives. You wouldn't want to go backwards in that sense. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I think going forwards is like you'd like more technology and more things to be automated, but you wouldn't like it if it was in your face. Like they did, one of the surveys was like if you go into Safeway and you walk, I think it was like an example, like if it knew what you liked and you walked by a screen in Safeway and it flashed up the type of cereal that you eat, that would freak you out because you noticed the technology was there. Now, if you go to buy
Mm-hmm.
your cereal and it gives you a discount, if you walk by the cereal you like and it says 10% off valued customer, you say, "Oh, I love that." And the respondent said, "Oh, I'd feel good about that." So I think, if they feel like that email, like you're saying, is from a person or maybe redirecting them to other roles, then people would love it. Let's
Yeah,
go. Toss it in the
I think it's about, yeah, was that?
suggestion box.
Mm. Um, yeah, I think it's about I mean, like you said, even if we just think of our experiences, I think it's about not making us feel like we're being shoehorned into the technology and that, we're trying to, like, our humanness is being sucked out of us because of it. It's more about trying to find ways to implement it that still make us feel okay and good about it, and that feels like it enhances our lives and not tries to make us just part of the machine, I think.
Mm-hmm. And one thing too, I think there's a lot of positive potential. Just this is not a Robert Half thing, but recruiting as a whole. I've heard this complaint from multiple um, people, is like, especially in engineering, certain personality types and people from similar backgrounds tend to get selected and moved up the chain. and it's not intentional discrimination, but sometimes people who are in a hiring position maybe gravitate too much towards people of their own background, so I think these tools can have like the positive effect of, well, is like, hey, it can really make, especially from a hiring standpoint, data visible. Like, hey, these people both have 10 years of experience, they both have these projects, they both have this. You shouldn't, because we're human, whether we say we don't have any bias or we never want to favor one group over another. Subliminally, our brains are doing things that sometimes the visualization of the data and these systems can really help make things more equitable, I feel like, too. um,
Hmm.
and I think that's one of the interesting kind of parts about it, kind of going more towards the positive side, is like you could use that to really show people like, hey, why are we making the decisions we're making? Maybe questioning humans sometimes, because humans make bad decisions too. I hear all the people talking about the AI
Hmm.
hallucinating. Humans make a lot of bad decisions all day, all the time, that are not good for their lives
Oh yeah,
and other people's
yeah,
lives without AI
yeah,
for thousands of years.
yeah. It's funny. It's funny though how we blame the technology, right? Like, there's a lot of parts of the internet that aren't that great. We blame the internet. I think generally, we blame the technology instead of the human beings that are interacting with it. That's how I feel anyway. That um, it's often hard for us to separate those things, to
Yeah,
take accountability as humanity.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a good point. It's like, well, that's the simplistic. Oh, well, the internet's bad because people sell drugs online. Well, it's like, well, people are selling drugs, and then there happens to be the online aspect to it, or whatever the vice or the bad thing may be, right? So it's like,
Hmm.
I agree. People are smart, they use tools. We've always made new tools and implemented them, so I feel like AI is no different. There's, I think, some examples already of AI becoming extremely racist because people just unleash it onto like 4chan or something. And then there's the opposite side where they feed it positive data and have it like reading a bunch of, famous novels and a large, through these large language models. So it's really just again reflecting us. Our technology is just reflecting back on us. But now the freaky part is our technology can actually talk to us now and respond back. Yeah.
Right. And imitate us and the people that we know and care about. And I saw something the other day where um, they played like 10-second snippet of someone's voice, and then they could create audio of that person talking.
Mm-hmm.
I know I read that there's a scam going on where they might call, let's say, your phone, and you have a voicemail that says, Blake is not here, please leave a message. They take that audio,
Mm-hmm.
they feed it into this, and then they can call like your grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And like, this is a scam that's going on. They can call your grandmother and be you and say, Grandma, I need help. I'm in trouble. I need $5,000. Like, yeah, I guess that's the bad part of all of this. But it's crazy what people come up with and use these technologies for.
I mean, I saw something about that happening here in the Bay Area. So it's freaky. And, there was one where this person was using the AI to pretend they had kidnapped someone's daughter to get them to send money. But then she kind of felt like she was like, oh my God, but wait, isn't my daughter over here? So she called her daughter's phone number, like again, like hung up, called back, and then the daughter answered. She's like, "Oh, where are you?" She's like, "Oh, I'm just at school." She's like, "What?" It was like, freaking her out, and that's how
Yeah.
these things are now. So like, really, I think the freaky part, now we're gonna get a little sidetracked, but I think it's important to say like some of these tools are so advanced it will make you question your reality. So you have to be careful of what you see and hear, because it's almost going to be
Mm-hmm.
like those 1800s crazy print presses where people would have those like psycho newspapers, but they say, "Oh, this is the news," but it's like, no, it's coming from a very non-trustworthy source, and now we have to question even the voices, the voices that we're going to hear too. Like there has to be now some AI tool verifying like a real voice, like a dual factor authentication
Yeah.
on a live call. That's actually look, we created a new idea for a company right there. Oh, so
There'll be
somebody,
like a arms war, AI arms war going
it
on.
looks like it's already happening, man. Yeah, cool. Oh, I lost. We're out of light. There, we're back. But yeah, I think we got a lot of definitely like talking about the art and some of those like it always happens now with AI because I'm just like there's just so many applications. Like I feel like they're not even that much of a jump, but it's just cool that we're able to make that jump, even if it's a 20% jump or a 10% jump or this little tiny functionality, and you add those all up of all the changes that are going on right now. We got a lot of fun stuff coming down the line and maybe not
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. I think part of it, is that we're inundated with new advances, I think, so quickly now. And we tend to like maybe get so used to it so quickly. We're just so used to that now, I think, that maybe it feels like it's not quite as big a jump as it might be, maybe. I mean, it was just like how long ago? Like I wrote a job description with Chat GPT. I mean, with like basically 4 sentences, it
Mm-hmm.
wrote a really good job description. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we could have done that, what, 6 months ago, right? Like it just, there was no tool to do that, really.
Yeah, I
Um,
I agree.
yeah,
It's kind of
yeah,
what the I think the frog boiling water example is a bad one, but it's like, that
mm,
idea can easily be applied to that because we're
mm,
we're desensitized. There's the word I'm looking for. We're getting
yeah,
really
desensitized.
desensitized to a lot of things. And I think it's in a good way because once you become like if you told me 5 years ago, like, hey, I could make a 30-page paper. I could do all your homework in less than 5 minutes for a whole 4-year degree. I'd be like, come on, what the hell are you on drugs? Like that's
Yeah,
not happening for 20 years. But then now it's here. I'm like, well, okay, that's cool. I can understand the logic as to why they got there. Well, now what's the next step? And so I think
right.
we're gonna in our lifetimes in 10 years, like this is a one like I think ChatGPT, I saw it in October or November of last year, and we're in June, so 7 months, and it's already people are just so casually like, yeah, yeah, you can do this, yeah, you can do that, whatever. And that's 7 months ago, so it's like 7 months from now, it's just gonna be jumping even crazier and higher. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's really made an impact on academics too. There is a lot of consternation and angst in the academic world, I think, from middle school to high school to post grad, of people just being able to type a prompt and pass a class. I mean, that really changes things, right? Like, that
It
feels pretty disruptive.
It does, but I would argue just like engineers getting calculators, your expectation of what you're able to do is going to rise significantly. Just like my same argument with AI and people saying, oh, programmers are going to go away. No, the expectation of what a programmer needs to do is going to rise exponentially along with the tools that come with it. So I have a master's degree in history, and oh my God, my final thesis, I could have busted out in about one day now. It was a 30-page paper. It took me weeks to write that. I,
Mm,
in fact, you know what? I'm gonna just do this for fun because we're here. So I'm just gonna let's do this. Let's just share Chrome. So yeah, I don't want to watch the. Can you see the DuckDuckGo?
mm,
Okay,
mm.
cool. Bard. Let's go to Bard real quick. What's your favorite subject in history?
In history, it's Rome, ancient Rome.
on the fall of ancient. So this is 5, 6 weeks of work. However, okay, okay, expand into 30 pages. I don't think Google will do it for me, but yeah, sure. Here's a 30-page essay. Huh. Is there more to this? In the
I think you might be able to take bite parts of it, right, and just piece them together. I think you could get around it if you did it the right way.
well, also it's
But
an
I mean, look at it.
yeah. Look how fast it generated all these ideas. So look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Even just the planning aspect of an essay, just like so. Oh, okay, that's freaking me
All
out
right.
now. Here, let me unshare. Okay, we're
We
back
don't
to
know
normal.
if it's right. We don't know if the facts are right.
That's well,
We don't know
that's
if what it wrote is true.
yeah, that's very true. And you'd have to. What I could see, like I had to write an essay in 30 pages and have footnotes. So you take one of these tools like ChatGPT Premium or whatever their advanced version, extrapolate that in 30 pages, say, hey, now make sure you include footnotes or, of fact check sources. And then you could just crash down weeks of work from a research standpoint. I mean, for me, from a research standpoint, whatever subject you want to find, as long as it's drawing from reputable sources, this is just the same as like it's like Google on steroids, in my opinion, because it's taking that you would have searched through like 5, 10, 20 pages on Google, um, read it, said, "Oh,
Had to
okay."
read so many sources, yeah, all that stuff, right?
So it just crashes it all. I mean, that's my 2 cents. So I think we're still gonna have college classes. I think the teachers that are telling kids this is terrible, this is bad, is like you're okay, I'm gonna get on my bully pulpit because I was in a social sciences, master's degree. Like a lot of them, they just are educators, and that's great, and we need educators. But sometimes they just don't. They think a lot of things are bad because they don't really like work in the professional world. They don't really like. They're not the movers and the shakers. They're sitting behind the desk shaking their fist at the world, as my experience I had in a lot of cases. So rather than
Yeah,
take it negative, oh, this is so bad, they could teach the kids how to use this and say, hey, I expect you to use this and I expect your end results to be much better than what you have now. Right.
yeah, and I think there might be other ways to determine whether someone knows information, if that's the point of the education, right? They might have to just define in other ways to for students to convey that beyond just writing a paper, perhaps.
Or move backwards and go into something like a Socratic method or something where it's like, okay, you had all this time to go on Bard and Chat GPT. Now I want you to stand in front of the class and explain why da 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 da, or I want
Mm-hmm.
you to tell me why this works. Because realistically, in the
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say like real world, but yeah, that's kind of like you have to explain why you think your ideas have merit in most work
Yeah.
situations. And most of your life is just communication. So maybe that could
Mm-hmm.
be we're going backwards. The technology is so advanced, actually, is forcing us to go slightly
You go
backwards.
backwards.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
Because that's the ultimate way. Like, take away someone's phone and just be like, hey, tell me why this is this. And then they'll either, then you'll really know who knows.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
And who just went to Chat GBT and told it to write a 30-page essay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I posted this when I saw this come out, like around February. I was like, my degree basically is kind of worthless because I could do my whole degree in 1 or 2 days. All the prompts, all the papers I got, I could just do it with this. Does it mean I'm intelligent? No. But I think the same argument is like, who cares if someone's really good at doing raw calculations with a pen and pencil? Nobody cares. It's not going to get you anywhere in the world. Sorry if anyone's watching this and gets offended, but that's just the reality is the tools are so advanced. Knowing, all your times tables at the top of your head isn't going to get you ahead anymore. That's my argument for this. Just knowing facts, like I think conceptually understanding things will still always get people ahead, but just knowing facts and figures, hasn't worked for a long time, and it's not going to do that much for you. But I think maybe even from a conceptual standpoint, you could get someone that's maybe not a big picture person, and this could help them. If you flip, look at it a positive way, it could help them understand things more big picture, which there's a lot of people
Mm.
that it's hard for them to quantify some of these things.
Or even how to structure the essay, or even, how to convey information. Some people aren't good at that. It can also help them do that. Um,
I I
that kind of
asked it
tool.
I asked it to build me an email marketing campaign for, my work, and it said you need to concentrate on this, get your tone, and I was like, wow, I've been doing sales and marketing more or less for
Mm-hmm.
10 years almost. And I'm learning, I'm not too big to learn. So it's like it'll teach you stuff. Even I'm really good in this field, I feel like I tell myself that. So
Mm-hmm.
or even, you ask it some engineering questions and it'll really blow you away. You're like, oh, wow, that makes me think harder about what I thought I knew. So I think even if one thing I'd challenge people if they've made it to this point of the podcast is whatever field you're in, whatever you do, if there's something you think you know super well, ask it a hard question from your field and it will actually spit out pretty good answers in many cases that'll make you think deeper about what you know. Hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I feel like we covered a lot of good stuff. And actually, that last like
Yeah.
20 was pretty cool. Like that, I really do just like playing with these tools. And I think they're so accessible. Like, there's no coding or any like this. You're just like, put it up. I even, I think 2 or 3 podcasts ago, I built a Nintendo game with this guy, Martin. And I don't understand anything that I'm doing. But so it's definitely fun if you're creative and thinking about these problems, you can find a lot of really cool answers. So anytime you have like a really crazy question, I urge people to go ask one of these tools what its answer is. Take it with a grain of salt, but
Yeah.
ask the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be skeptical. I mean, but yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, anything else? Any wrapping up thoughts you'd like to depart us with?
No, thanks a lot for having me, Blake. It was good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed talking with you about this stuff. Um, yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thank you for jumping on and have a great day. Okay, Richard?
You too, Blake. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.